Generally for the restoration of municipal services.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that point in agenda item 6, where we just start to throw around some ideas of how far we as a cluster, at least initially, are going to start getting involved in sort of support for returns or wash interventions in places of origin. Because sometimes the more you discuss it, the more we'll realize just how complicated it actually is. Okay, so if there's no more, we'll move back on to agenda item 3. And please, again, anytime, any questions, please do feedback to us. A multi-cluster assessment went very quickly into Bonaire last Thursday. Prior to that, there was a UNDSS security assessment, which sort of paved the way for the colleagues to go. I don't have the full list in front of me, but wash cluster, health cluster, protection cluster, emergency shelter.
I think only education and agriculture were not there.
Education and agriculture were not there. They needed to reduce it based on security sort of issues. They reduced the number of vehicles that were going to go. So these clusters were represented, and the feedback from WASH, Jamal Shah, the NWP cluster coordinator, went on behalf of WASH. They're putting together the report. The report is not yet out yet. It should be in the next few days. Sort of the basic sort of just some quick points of feedback that maybe then you guys can ask any questions on, so I can make sure that that is reflected in the final report. Some points of interest that you feel are not mentioned, if indeed they were addressed. In Bonaire, that there are 158 water supply schemes, approximately 130 pumping and 26 gravity systems. So the pumping are largely the operation, the operationalization, I guess, of these water supply schemes is essentially the availability of electricity. That's a major issue for this. They have confirmed what the government has indeed said, that electricity has now been restored to about 70% of the area, and so approximately 70% of these pumping schemes are functioning. The main towns you asked about, Duggar and Sawari, are getting drinking water from these schemes. Part of one of the, well, we'll talk about the constraints a little bit later. A couple of the concerns that the team did have, and Jamal in particular, there was not enough interaction with the community beyond the towns. So while they verified with communities that they were able to interact with, that the electricity has been restored significantly, you couldn't necessarily say that it was 100% verified. So again, they were there for a day trip. It was actually just a few hours in District Bonaire. So access to rural water supply schemes, they couldn't really assess damages in the rural areas outside the main road. There is an estimate from the Public Health Engineering Department, though, that 50% of those systems or schemes, however small or large, would require repair. So again, not something that could be verified by the team in the short time they were there. But again, this was meant to be sort of a quick thing.
I'm sorry, you said 50.
Rural. So electricity, again, restored to approximately 70%, which was at least somewhat verified by the communities that they did have interaction with, but they had very limited access outside of the main roads to really look at sort of the rural areas and what effects might have been there. Yeah, so that's one of the points coming out of this, is that does need to be something that does need to be looked at. Again, one of the recommendations that these schemes, when repaired and once electricity is restored, where electricity has not yet been restored, we can't even really determine whether these schemes are going to be functioning properly once electricity is restored. So a lot of that also remains to be seen for some of the schemes. On sanitation, the feedback from Jamal was that district authorities did not mention it as an area requiring priority attention, but it was observed by the team that in the town areas, and in particular the bazaars, the TMAs were not functional, and I think that's something very recently now. We're seeing the needs come from the local government, but they've not been functional for the last couple of months. So main drainage lines in the marketplaces are completely blocked, which is a potentially very critical issue as we move, to the rainy season. Yeah, so there's a lot of potential for drains being backed up, water sanitation, hygiene-related disease, etc. The recommendation, again, from this, the TMA should be given immediate support to sort of rectify that situation. And yes, the local government has identified this as a priority need. That's very, very brief. Again, the draft of the report from the entire mission will be a little bit more detailed. There are areas still under curfew from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Again, the team just had a few hours. They spoke with their relevant government counterparts, and then also with some communities. But again, it wasn't really a chance for them really to get into the rural areas. So we're hoping, as a cluster or as different agencies, to get more feedback from Bonaire. A couple agencies have assessments from there, and we're looking to sort of compile that and then share that with all of you. And it may, because Bonaire is being discussed as one of the first areas for return, phase 1 sort of returns, how we as a cluster decide to go forth in Bonaire, I think is critical in sort of highlighting how we go through to the other areas. So again, we'll discuss that a little bit in agenda item 6. But any questions specifically on Bonaire or anything you'd like to see in this? That certainly this was very, very brief. They had some issues with their escorts, etc., which even delayed their departure even further. So they really just had a few hours. But anything specific that maybe is not here that you'd like to see here, if again that information is available.
I have one question. I don't know, like the percentage of population they are living in urban area in Bonaire and rural area. Like, what is the percentage?
I actually don't know offhand. Maybe.
The Bonaire, district Bonaire, it's 100% rural area, because prior to the 2001 devolution of powers, it was completely no municipal communities or municipal corporations, that kind of things. No formal municipality exists, and that's why hardly you find any sanitation staff in the whole of district Bonaire. And the point which Asya mentioned and which Jamal had pointed in his report, that just to remove certain, to clear certain areas, the agricultural manual staff have been put to sanitary kind of work. And the team and agriculture department and district administration is doing that. And one more information that I may add to Jamal's observation, that the district Bonaire administration has decided to establish 2 IDP camps within district Bonaire. One at the most devastated village of Sultan Was, for those people who belong to that particular village and which has completely been devastated. And secondly, in some of the areas where there are still problems, the families of those areas are being shifted to somewhere near the degree college, Suwali, one of the main town. So that's one area where our friends present here may be interested to extend certain helps to the government and those schemes.
There is discussion going on about that in particular, about sort of the humanitarian community's concern about establishing camps there and our capacities and abilities to support that, especially if that's something that is going to become common in these areas of return. So that's sort of an ongoing discussion.
Can you clarify, would the camps be for IDPs who are returning?
One of them you can call it for the return is because one of the village Sultan was the most damaged village. The people